This podcast represents the opinions of our hosts and their guests only. The content here should not be taken as medical advice and is for informational purposes only. And because each person is so unique, please consult your healthcare professional for any medical questions. Welcome to Once Shattered, Picking Up the Pieces. Linda Major, Jack Major, and Ellen Bennett are three fierce advocates, two moms and a dad who are passionate about changing the way eating disorders and mental illness are viewed in our society. Linda, Jack, and Ellen believe we need to stop the stigma, band together, and help people find resources and support early on. They advocate to foster awareness, enhance education, and improve treatment, as well as to help society understand and embrace individuals and families who are affected by eating disorders and all mental health conditions.
Welcome, everyone, to Once Shattered, Picking Up the Pieces, episode 110. A most inspiring, courageous, healing journey with Jane, and she's going to be joining us in just a moment. But first, I'd like to introduce my co-hosts, my husband and my soulmate, Jack. That's your name, right? Jack Major.
Still is, yeah.
And our dear friend and fellow advocate, Ellen Bennett.
Hello, everyone. Ellen, thank you for joining us again today. Jane's joining us all the way from London.
Yep, she'll be with us in just a second.
England.
Yeah, this is our first international broadcast. So what do you think of that, Ellen?
I think it's awesome. We are so happy to be back, so excited for this conversation.
Well, I want to just read a quote to get us started, and it's a quote that speaks to this unique, honest, and heartwarming episode and our friend Jane. And this quote is by Angela Gwinner. "There are no coincidences. The soul seeks its own path." I just thought that was something that we could let sink in a little bit. Right now, I think we're going to welcome Jane, and then I'll read her bio. So, Jane, are you there?
I'm here, all the way from England. Hello.
Welcome. So you're 5 hours ahead, right? We're
5 hours ahead, yeah.
5 hours, yeah. How's the weather there?
It's England. It's cold. It's raining. Tomorrow's going to be the same, and the whole for the weekend. Yeah, welcome to England.
That's kind of like Rochester. It's it's actually fairly warm today. It's in the 40s, so Fahrenheit. So we've had some cold weather, but it's going to be warm the next few days. Actually, it's going to get up to 65 tomorrow. So that's unusual for December, but it's still gray. I always say the colors in Rochester, you could paint Rochester's landscape in the winter from grays, browns, and white.
Well, I'm going to read your bio in just a moment, but right now I'm going to let you talk to Jane and Ellen or to Jack and Ellen for just a second more.
Well, Jane, I'm going to say our journey has given all of us the opportunity to meet incredible people from our region, our country, and around the world. And it's just amazing. And so we are just so thrilled to have this conversation with you today. And I am so fortunate that Jack and Linda shared you with me. They introduced me to you and told me a little bit about your journey. So just hugs to you.
Yeah. And, from writing our book and these podcasts, we've met so many people, and we call them the Emily Connection.
So I'm going to read a little bit about Jane for you guys. Jane, don't blush, okay? But this is a really nice bio. Jane was born and raised in London in what can only be described as a very normal household with 4 siblings and a mom and a dad who quite simply adored each other and still do. There was always a pet of some kind in their household. Nothing remarkable happened, certainly no great traumas, yet at the age of 11, Jane developed a serious eating disorder. It wasn't until age 35 that Jane got a handle on recovery, thanks in no small part to the best dog to ever walk the planet, a beautiful, soulful rescue dog named Crystal. And Crystal was a bulldog. That special dog taught Jane the true meaning of unconditional love and gave her the courage to join life again. The endless cycle of hospital admissions stopped. And for the last 15 years, Jane has worked in the field of mental health and substance misuse, campaigning for better services, developing projects to challenge stigma, and educate people about mental illness. Jane is passionate about a fairer welfare system for low-income families, and she is currently employed by a wonderful organization which helps people access financial and emotional support as well as practical services. Jane's main love in life outside of her work is and always has been animals. She spends every moment of her spare time with her crazy greyhound, Daisy, and Jane also enjoys reading, watching rubbish TV, and spending time with her family. Welcome again.
Thank you.
Okay. So, Jane, I think we're going to get started here. Is there something that you want to say?
Yeah, first of all, I just really wanted to say that I'm really pleased to have the opportunity. I'm nervous, I'm not going to lie. And to be honest, I never talk about this subject. I can talk about mental health, but I don't ever talk about eating disorders or anorexia. And I think that's still to do with the huge stigma that surrounds it. I feel like it was a weakness. It is a weakness, and I carry it almost like a shame, like it was some crime that I committed. But I know, on the other hand, that until we start having these conversations, that stigma's never going to finish. So I'm pleased to have this opportunity, and thank you for forcing me out of my comfort zone.
Well, we're thrilled to have you here. So I woke up on Easter Sunday, April 4th, 2021, and I found an email from someone named Jane. We've been fortunate to receive many letters from wonderful people who've been moved by our book, Emily, the story of a girl and her family hijacked by anorexia, and Emily's story. And we are so grateful for each one. But Jane's words brought tears to my eyes. I read it to Jack and later to Alan Bennett, and their reaction was the same as mine. Jane had suffered from the same disease that took our daughters' lives. We wrote our book to help others, yet Jane's words helped the three of us. Her unfiltered view of anorexia, her compassion, her now rich life, and her wit made us laugh and cry. This connection is not a coincidence. It really isn't. And I really do feel that you are heaven sent, because your words are poetic in that wonderful English way. So would you mind reading what you wrote to me and what I found that Easter morning that touched us so?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. And I just to start with, I said this in my email. So I said to you, to dear Linda and Jack, writing emails isn't really something I do after reading books ever. I'm not somebody, I don't do reviews. I don't review things I've bought. I don't review things I've read. And I didn't write this in my email, but I always do my reading in the bath. So I was reading on my Kindle. And as I was reading the book, all the way through, I wanted to shout. I was kind of screaming. And because there was just this underlay the whole way through of questioning, of guilt, of what could we have done different? Is there something we could have said? And then that sort of made even more an issue, I think, by medical professionals also asking questions about what could you do? What did happen? What was the trauma? And I was literally shouting in my head at both of you, stop. This is not true. This is nothing would have made any difference when anorexia grips you in that way. And I want to start by saying as well, as I read my email, that not everything that I say is going to resonate with everybody else. with every family or with every sufferer, because everybody's different. We're all of us unique. You can't compare. So I'm not going to say that all the way through. So just to say at the beginning, these were my experience based on my story and all the many people I've met through kind of long hospital admissions and things. Some are with us, many unfortunately are not. So it's, these are my experiences and those of people that I've kind of walked this journey with. But I said to you, I hope you don't mind me emailing you, but I really wanted to answer the question that you'd raised a few times as you described your daughter's battle with anorexia. Could you have done anything different? Could you have influenced the eventual outcome for Emily? And for me, the simple answer, reading Emily's story, was no. No, I really don't think so. I feel you could have been the most perfect parents in the world, or like mine, or the worst. And your book certainly suggests that you were the former. But I feel the outcome may have been the same. You compared, as I've done actually, and I don't always feel that people have understood the severe and enduring anorexia when it gets you in your bones and in your brain and in your soul. I compare that to like an end stage or a stage 4 metastatic cancer. I had a time for 25 years when I only ever thought about food and weight and anorexia every second of every minute of every day of every week for 25 years. And that won't be everyone's experience. And that's what I call severe and enduring. And no one, friends, family, medics, they would never think of questioning a family with a child or a loved one with end stage or terminal cancer. They wouldn't ask you, could you have hugged your child more? Could you have put less pressure? Could you have put a bit more and encouraged? It's not a thing. So why is that a suitable question for somebody suffering with a severe eating disorder? And treatment centres and hospitals, yes, of course they have a place. They kept me alive on many occasions. They kept me alive. They didn't cure my anorexia. They didn't touch my anorexia, but they did keep me alive. They didn't help me recover. They can encourage, or in some cases, certainly in mine, they can force weight gain. But at the end of the day, this isn't the answer to the problem, which I'll talk about more. If the illness is strong, you can have admission after admission. Well, in England, I know things are different where you are. Insurance can change. We're very lucky in some ways, but sometimes when it's become your everything, it doesn't make a difference. And people don't understand, why would you deliberately starve yourself? Why would you want to be in pain every day? The cold is one of the things that I remember more than anything. I think I was glued to a radiator for the best part of 25 years. Why would you do that? And I think it's if you can understand that, it will make it so much easier for people to treat or to work with people with eating disorders. It's people describe it as a slow suicide, but I see it almost as the opposite. It's a crutch. It numbs anxiety. It reduces fear, and just your appearance says to the whole world, I'm not coping. The person that you think is intelligent and happy and accomplished is not coping, without you even having to open your mouth and say anything. My opinion, and this is just my opinion, is once the anorexia is ingrained to the point where it is your identity and everything else is consumed by it, whether you make it or whether you don't, whether you live or whether you die, depends on whether something else comes along to fill that hole that anorexia fills for you before it's too late. And for me, in my experience, that was purely luck. That was purely luck. it wasn't something a parent did or didn't do. And that was what I had to tell you really loud. I had to tell you. For me, my problems began when I was in the final year of primary school. So 10 going on 11. And I didn't even begin to consider recovery until I was 35. I did not want a bar of it. It was doing what I needed it to do. However horrible it was, it was doing what I needed it to do. And I'm now, I did email you my age, so I might as well say it. So I was 48 when I wrote this email. I'm 49 now. And gradually over time, the disease, the illness that had threatened my life on many occasions, other things which I'll talk about just kind of came along by chance. I'd had a hospital admission, so I guess my nutrition was enough to physically cope with a job, and just things happened, and something else trickled in to the whole, and then it became a battle, a daily battle. What do I want more? Do I want to hold on to anorexia? Do I want these other things? Which means more? But it was luck. It wasn't anything else anyone did, and I think if that hadn't happened, then I'd be with your girls. In fact, my closest friends of over 30 years said to me a few years ago, she said, "You wouldn't believe the number of times I've written your eulogy." And it was, that was quite something. And you'd written your book a couple of years before I emailed you, so I didn't even know if you'd get my email or Linda, if that was even your email address, because I changed my email address. But I just felt, you know what, even if she never reads it, I'll have said it. And if she does read it, maybe one person saying that I had this and it nearly took me and it was awful and none of it was down to my mum and dad. Maybe you'll believe that just a little bit. And I felt it important to ask you, don't waste any more time on an emotion that isn't yours to carry. Don't waste any more time on guilt. You could have held Emily 24 hours a day, and trust me, her illness held her tighter. You could have shielded her from every unpleasant situation that life threw her way. Anorexia does that better. And you could have done a million things, a billion different ways. But when you have anorexia to that degree, it doesn't let any words penetrate. At that stage, at kind of end stage, it doesn't, which is why I consider myself extremely lucky to be here. My parents, they weren't responsible for me getting sick, and sorry, parents, they weren't responsible for me getting better. I was lucky. I found 2 coping mechanisms in time. They just came. Death could have come first. They came first. Emily didn't, and Katie didn't, and that's no one's fault. But what you did do is give your daughter something that anorexia never does. You gave her dignity. Dignity in life. Anorexia is undignified. It makes you do horrible things, say horrible things, be somebody you're not. It doesn't give you dignity in life, and it doesn't give you dignity in death. You did that for her. You gave her that. It was an amazing book, and I know it's going to help. Maybe even if it doesn't help sufferers, and I'll talk later about why books don't, it will. I know it will help families and it will help parents.
And just listening to you read that again, I'm all teared up.
Yeah, me too.
Wow.
I've read this, I've read that email before so many times, and I cry every time. But I thank you for that.
The acknowledgement from you that as parents, we gave our children unconditional love and dignity was so powerful for me, because I think if we asked for anything, that's what we wanted validation of. That those 2 pieces are so important. So you can hear, you can feel like your email just grabbed us.
And it grabbed us because you lived it. You have come out the other side. And I just can't tell you how affirming that was. And even though we know that we did the best we could and we knew that our girls were loved and supported every day of their lives, you still can't go back to the woulda, shoulda, couldas. But when I do, I go back and I read your letter. So thank you so much for that. Your email, I should say.
You're welcome.
The treatment of anorexia, you know, as a pharmacist, I've seen so many different treatments of other diseases change throughout the years, you know, treating hypertension, diabetes, cancer treatments, everything is treated differently than it was when I started in 1976 as a pharmacist. But treatment for eating disorders hasn't seemed to change in decades. We had Cindy Bullock on last podcast, and that's what she said. It hasn't changed in 40 years, you know, and that's the main focus of what we're trying to do here is change that treatment so people understand that it's not a choice. And like you said, when it's severe and enduring and it gets so ingrained that that person just has no choice, that eating disorder is their friend, their only friend in the world. And we just have to get the medical profession, and, you know, insurance is a lot different here, like you said, in America than it is in a lot of other countries, especially, you know, overseas. And we just have to get the insurance industry to understand that it's a mental illness. You can't just look at the physical and put weight on somebody and say, okay, now you're ready to go on. And they've got to treat the whole person in the continuum of care that can take months, years to help someone. So,
and someone like you with your lived experience, talking to somebody who's struggling, it's a tough disease. The mortality rate, it's the highest of any psychiatric illness outside of opioid addiction. But when someone sees somebody who's struggled, especially somebody who's struggled for a long time, that tells them there's hope for me. There's hope.
Yeah, Emily would tell us all the time, you know, she'd go to the grocery store or whatever. Everybody just assumed she had cancer, you know, and they were so compassionate to her. They would buy her stuff. She'd be in line to buy things, and they would buy them for her because they thought she had cancer, because, you know, she also had trichotillomania, so she didn't have any hair, and so she looked like a cancer victim, and everybody had that compassion. You know, if they knew she had an eating disorder, I'm not sure they would have
been as kind,
empathetic. You know? So, okay,
it's okay. Okay, yeah. Your writing is so inspiring and touched us deeply. My daughter, Katie, developed anorexia at age 11. She suffered with undiagnosed anxiety, which we didn't find out till after her death, as did Emily. And everyone else I know who also suffers from anxiety, suffers from anorexia or an eating disorder. And anxiety just seems to go hand in hand. What are your thoughts about anxiety and anorexia?
So I'm smiling at you now, Ellen, because this is a question. Oh, God, I wish I'd been asked this question. The strangest thing in my experience, and I don't know if things have changed now, but through kind of 25 years of treatment and all those years of doctors, and I think back and I think, do you know what? No one ever asked me why. No one ever asked me why is this going on for you? No one. And see, I honestly, and this is where other people may disagree, but for me, anorexia had absolutely, and this is where I'm not going to swear, but F all, nothing, sod all to do with food or with weight. For me, it was always anxiety. I don't remember a time, and this is why I can say with conviction it wasn't my childhood and upbringing. Even from when I was 2 years old, my earliest memories going into nursery school, I remember feeling like I don't fit in. I'm not the same. I don't belong. I'm boring. I'm not as pretty as the other kids. I just didn't feel like I was okay. I didn't feel right. It was always anxiety. And I just didn't know how to verbalize it. I didn't even understand it. I didn't know what was happening for me. I just knew that I didn't feel right. And often when I was in hospital, I would try and say, I don't feel comfortable in a social situation, or this makes me anxious. And I was always told the same: it's your anorexia. If you eat, you'll feel better. And I knew that wasn't the case, because I didn't enter any treatment till I was in my late teens. And I would sit there and I probably didn't reply, but I was thinking, okay, so you're telling me if I eat and gain weight, I'll feel better. Well, I didn't restrict my food when I was 7 or 8 or 9, and I felt just as I feel now. So I know that when I restrict my food and when I don't eat, those anxiety feelings get less. I don't have the brain power to worry about what people are thinking of me so much, because all I'm thinking about is food and calories and weight. So no, you're wrong. Actually, my anxiety will get worse. And I don't want this to come across as something to deter people, but it's true. And in recovery, my anxiety did get worse. And I suffer with anxiety every day. I hide it really, really well. People with eating disorders are masters at disguise, lies and manipulation. And I think if you were to talk to my work colleagues now, I've been in this job just for about 18 months. What's Jane like? And they'll say, very confident, very self-assured, and nothing could be further from the truth. It can take me 3 hours to leave my front door to go to the corner shop, because I'm worried about what will people think? What if I bump into somebody? What if I have no conversation for them? No, anxiety is crippling, but now I have other ways that I deal with it. But when I was told that the answer was nutrition and weight gain, I was intelligent enough, and I'd had the experience to tell me that just wasn't true. That wasn't going to work for me. In fact, the opposite was true. So I think the other thing about anxiety and anorexia, why anorexia works, this is another thing that I would love health professionals and sometimes family members and friends to understand is it really, really, really works. If you were at sea and you were drowning and someone offered you a lifebelt, you'd take it, wouldn't you? You'd take it and you'd grasp it for all of its worth. Yeah. If you've discovered something, and I was 11 and it was the 80s, apart from Karen Carpenter, I don't think anyone really knew about anorexia. I certainly didn't know what it was. Yeah. But all of a sudden I started doing these strange things and I felt my anxiety go down just a little. And more than that, people reacted to me differently. Their expectations were a bit less. Oh, we can't say to the fragile child at school, you're going to do really well and you're going to get A's and you're going to achieve, because she doesn't even look like she can make it to the exam hall. Excellent. Thank you, anorexia. Thank you again. You've reduced people's expectations of me. That's exactly what I need you to do. And I remember this really clearly when I was about 11, just turned 11 and went to secondary school. And, oh, God, PE was awful in those days. And I liked PE. I remember our PE teacher. I could name her because she's long gone, but I won't. And she lined all the girls up. I went to a convent school, Catholic school. Probably why I'm not very religious now, but there we go. We were all lined up. And she stood in front of all of us in our leotards. And she said to us, when you reach, and she named a weight, she said, this is the weight at which girls will start to menstruate and become women. And I thought, okay, so I'm terrified of life. No, I won't have that. Thank you very much. And 2, up until when age 35, even when I was in hospital, I would never reach that weight. Never. And I would self-discharge, or I would categorically deny that I couldn't have a normal life at that weight. She just said to me, this is the way at which life starts, adulthood starts, maturity and responsibility starts. And I thought, okay, that makes me anxious. And even if I was 0.1 of a kilo below that weight, I was not going to hit that. I was not going to hit that.
Wow.
So yeah, anxiety and anorexia are linked for me, in that anxiety was my problem, low self-esteem was my disease, anorexia was my crutch.
You articulate this so incredibly clearly, and it all makes sense. And now we have the genetic research that says clearly anxiety is a marker, you know? And I think back of how as a child you were so dismissed. And you really, if somebody had really taken the time to listen to what you were trying to say, maybe there would have been an acknowledgement. But also, again, I know I have a second daughter, and she's now in her 30s, and we realized that she was someone who had anxiety at a very, very young age. I didn't recognize it until she had a full-blown anxiety attack at age 20. And she did not end up with an eating disorder, but it's just, you know, it's all those other factors. But anxiety, we have to acknowledge that it is so much a part of eating disorders, and certainly anorexia.
Well, it's the way that we're wired, and it's also the masterful way that people who have eating disorders are the most wonderful people, but they're also masters of hiding what they don't want other people to see. And as parents, we think that we know our kids better than they know themselves, but we miss the mark sometimes. We all do. And I think that these conversations, like this conversation that we're having right now, will maybe direct some different conversations, not only amongst families and looking at their child when they're not behaving in the way that they think they should, or they sense something isn't quite right. You know, maybe anxiety will, pop in. Well, maybe it's anxiety because, I listened to this and maybe I should broach it this way. And with counselors and therapists, I think that we need to find ways, as Ellen always says, to start the conversations. And everybody isn't the same. And I think with anorexia, so much of the time they tell the people who are struggling, well, it's your disease. It's your anorexia talking. Mm-hmm. It's your disease. And I think you also have to be realistic that when you are treated for an eating disorder and you gain weight, it doesn't feel better. It's going to take a long time to get comfortable in your skin again and work on all those things. But I can't tell you what an inspiration your story is to us. And because we're all about other people not walking down the path that we're walking down, and certainly, not the path our daughters walk down. So I'm just so pleased that you agreed to come on and share your story. And after I read your first email, I had to write back because the question that I had to ask was, you said anxiety is, or you talked about coping mechanism and how anorexia was the perfect coping mechanism. And you found something pretty miraculously that filled that role of anorexia for you. So I just had to write back and ask you, can you tell me about the things that took the place of anorexia for you?
And Linda, when I read that part of your email, I'll be honest, there was a little part of my heart almost sunk a little bit, because I'd done a little bit of work in carers workshops. I went back to one of the hospitals I'd been treated and offered to take part in some of the workshops with parents and partners, and they would almost home in when I came as somebody with lived experience, and I could see desperation. Like, you've been where our daughters have been, where our partners have been, and they could see I was healthy, and it was like, please tell me the answer. Give me the solution. What is the key? And that's really difficult because there isn't one answer for one person. And I used to listen sometimes in hospital to when people would come back and talk about their stories and what had helped. And when you're really ill as well, you just can't hear it. I was like, yeah, okay, so that worked for you, and bully for you. I was almost like, bully for you, well done, move on. This works for me, and I'm not budging. And just as when the anorexia started, it was really slow and really manipulative in the way it took over my brain. Recovery was just as devious. I didn't want it. I didn't want recovery. I was comfortable in my uncomfortableness. It was working for me. But the two things happened, and it can be anything for anybody. But so when I was in hospital and treatment was being kind of forced, I guess, I don't think I ever went involuntarily. And I used to sit in the therapy sessions and things, and I used to think, but I did a lot of thinking. I didn't do a lot of joining in, by the way, in the group talk. I thought that was all just like therapy stuff. And I used to think, well, so if I give this up, who will I be? Like, this is all I've been. This is what I'm known of as. This is who I was at school. This is who my parents' friends know me as. Well, I'll be nothing. And to me, with bearing in mind, I strongly believe that illness is low self-esteem. Being nothing was terrifying. I would rather be dead. I would rather be dead than nothing. Something had to stop the nothing. And I left hospital one time because I got within 0.1 kilo of the menstruation weight, from the gym teacher. So I swore I would be good. And so I was taken off my section and I packed my bags and I left the same day, even though I'd said, no, I'll stay voluntarily for the next 6 months and work your program. No chance. I left. And I went, I knocked on the door. I'd seen an advert, shows how long ago it was. I'd seen an advert in a paper for a job, and it was working for a mental health service user group. And I thought, so that's going to be other people who maybe won't think I'm a freak when I panic about something, or I get anxious, or I get nervous, or I worry when I'm around other people, or maybe. And I just thought, I have to have that job. I have to. And the deadline had passed, and I knocked on the door, and this really strange guy, who I later found out had bipolar. It's got nothing to do with the way he looked. He was just an odd-looking man that made me feel comfortable. I opened the door and I said to him, look, I know that the deadline for this job has gone, but you need to give me this job. And I went through the interview process and everything. And apparently I did the worst practical test. I had to do a spreadsheet or something, but a good interview, and I got the job. And so I was working at this job and just little things on a daily basis. And bearing in mind, I wasn't well at all. I still passed out in the office. I was a mess. But then I remember specifically this one day I was talking to a client on the phone and I couldn't concentrate. Like, I was starving. And but I needed to help them. I needed to think. And I was like, what do I do? Do I eat and help this person so I can think, or do I not? And do I continue? And I did eat a bit, and I was able to carry on the conversation. And that was it. And just day after day, I just realized I couldn't have both. And one was giving me a sense of, do you know what? I'm okay. I can do this job. Like, I only thought I could do anorexia. I can do this job as well. This is something else. And then a few years in, I rescued my dog, my Crystal. And that was a story as well, because people think of a rescue dog as like they bound into your lives and they jump up and down and they love you. And my Crystal wasn't like that. She was moody as hell. She would sulk. She would give me dagger eyes. It was a slow burn. But again, I felt I'm in the company of a misfit, just as I felt at work. This is my zone. She will understand if I'm not perfect. I don't have to be perfect. And we kind of grew together in our imperfection. And I might start crying now, but she got me in a way that no one has ever understood me. And I didn't have to do anything. I just had to be. Can you imagine anything more than that? You don't have to do anything. You just have to be. And anorexia might have stolen my life, but that dog, she stole my soul. She stole my soul. And I always said, I hope my dog next to me isn't listening here. She's not. Other dogs will come and they will steal my heart. And this dog certainly has. But that one, she got my soul. Yeah, she got my soul. And those two things together just made me start to let go a little bit. And for every few seconds that anorexia wasn't on my brain was because either my dog or my job was. And then the balance shifted until I remember the first time, like an hour had gone by. I was out walking Crystal. I suddenly thought, an hour's gone by and I haven't thought about food. Like an hour, a whole hour. To me, it was mind blowing.
Wow.
Like nowadays I can do a day. I can't do more than a day, but I can do a day. But that, and the first time I really laughed, that was for me when I would say, okay, so I'm doing this whole recovery thing you've all been blabbing on about for donkey's years. And I remember I was in the office with one of my fellow kind of imperfect, colleagues, and she was just an idiot. And I can remember what the joke was, but I'm not going to share it because it would be meaningless now. But we were, when you're literally rolling on the floor and tears pouring out of your eyes with laughter. And then I just suddenly stopped. And I hadn't told any of them about my eating disorder. I like to tell myself they didn't know when I walked in there looking like Skeletor. Yeah, I convinced myself they didn't know. They believed my stories that I had a metabolic issue. And I just remember thinking then, like I faked happiness for all these years because it's all part of wanting to come across as perfect and okay. But that was the first time I'd actually laughed and not been faking it for 25 years. And that's when I knew something had shifted. Something had changed.
Wow. Oh my gosh.
And I remember in the email too, you had talked about having to be strong enough to carry your dog because something had happened to your dog. Was in an accident.
Yeah. And can I just say, my beautiful greyhound has just got off the sofa in a huff and gone out of the room. So I think she heard me talking about my Crystal. I think dogs are very intuitive, so I'm going to have to do some explaining later.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so Crystal, she had an accident. It was an awful accident. I think she'd seen a cat or something, but she jumped from the window of my flat and I'm on the third floor. It was probably the worst day of my life. But anyway, so I won't really dwell on what happened, but her recovery was really, really long. And for a long time, I mean, she wasn't supposed to survive, and I don't think the vets thought she would survive. But I threw everything I could at that dog, everything. I won't tell you how much money, because if my parents ever hear this, they'll kill me. But and I won't also talk about the loan I took out or any of these things. But I wanted her to still experience everything she loved. Yeah. And one of the things that Crystal loved more than anything was the playing fields near where I live. So even though physically I shouldn't have been able to pick her up, she was about 30 kilos. And But it just, to me, I had to get her to the playing fields. She had to go there every day. And again, a bit like when I was at work trying to help the client, it was like, I'm going to drop her. I feel really dizzy. Haven't eaten today. She has to get to the park. What do I do? What do I do? How do I make this decision? But she got into my soul. She'd pushed some of that disease away. And so just gradually, again, I had to get that little bit healthier, even though I really didn't want to. I used to say to myself, if I could do this job and love this dog and stay at X stone, I'll do that. Thank you very much. But it wasn't an option. And I had to choose, but it wasn't a conscious choice, if that makes sense. Just gradually something came in and something went out, and yeah.
Beautiful.
Well, I think part of what you just said answers my next question. We all believe in connections, that people need connections. So many people with eating disorders, and especially, we focus on anorexia, withdraw from everyone in their life. Emily just withdrew to her dark bedroom and just stayed there, much of the day. And
when she was really sick.
Yeah. So, she had her pet Duncan, who she loved more than anything in the world, and we still have him. He's 13 years old and blind, but he gets around, and I can't imagine not having him around. It's a part of Emily that's still there. And she had us, the loving family, and as Linda always says, if love was enough, she'd still be there. And she had, extended family too. But again, I imagine the changes that happen in your life, and you said they happened gradually, and you had to be patient. Were you patient with yourself? And
no.
Can you share?
I'm the most impatient person in the world. No, I wasn't patient. I wasn't patient with myself at all. I don't know. For me, it was just about, sometimes it's difficult to explain, but just finding something that would make me not feel like nothing. And I understand what you're saying with regards to the pushing everybody away. And for me, and I don't know if it was the same for your daughters, but I'm guessing some of it would have been the same. There were different reasons for pushing people away. One, probably kind of one of the overriding reasons, was because as parents, the most natural thing, and actually the right thing to want to do, is to get rid of the illness. Yes. I didn't want my parents to take my anorexia away. I didn't want them to see what it had become. I didn't want them to see the rituals that I carried out at home. I didn't want them to see what went on in the kitchen, what went on in the bathroom, what went on in the bedroom. I didn't want them to know. I didn't want them to be hurt by it. I didn't want them to be upset by it. But most of all, if I'm being honest, it wasn't about them. I didn't want them to take it away. And if they saw how bad things were, if they saw me clutching the radiator, clutching the hot water bottle, doing all these other things that actually don't even really matter, they would try and take that away. I had to keep them at bay. And also sometimes, particularly with my mum, every time I saw her, as much as she tried 90% of the time not to let it show, I saw the hurt in her eyes. I couldn't handle it. It was easier for me not to see it. And those were the reasons to withdraw. And also, I don't think, unless you've been in that situation, people don't really realize the energy it takes to be with other people. Mm-hmm. It takes energy, like physical energy. And when you've got none, like you're starving, it's difficult to explain, but you just don't have that. It's difficult to even speak, to formulate words, to make eye contact.
You say that, and anytime that I am sick now, all that I think about is Emily. I mean, if you have the flu, if I have a migraine, I get migraines once in a while. I know how hard it is sometimes to even say please and thank you. The effort it is. And I just think, how long people who are chronically ill, how much they suffer and what an effort it is to let people in and to engage. And I think about that all the time. I think about Emily first, but I think about all the people who are dealing with chronic illnesses and going through chemo, whatever the illness is, who suffer. And I think we have to cut them some slack. Absolutely.
Well, I think from listening to you, I think whether you were lucky that Crystal came into your life or was she was meant to, she saved it. She saved your life.
I think, personally, she was meant to be. I heard somebody say once, and I can't remember who, you get the dog you need, not the dog you want. On paper, I wouldn't have asked for a moody, dog-aggressive, angry, sulky, petulant, stuffy bull terrier. But God, she was what I needed. Yeah, she was what I needed. She taught me the real meaning of unconditional love. Like, we all like to think that, and I've never been a parent. Thank you again, anorexia, for that one. But there we go. You can't have it all. But I would imagine that most parents would say that their love for their children is unconditional. And I would say yes, but no. Like, I remember my mum always saying to me, and she was fantastic at this, the no pressure thing. Like, my dad was more academic, but my mum was all about I just want my children to be healthy and happy. Mm-hmm. And I remember hearing that over and over again. And I remember at age something silly, 6 or 7, thinking, happy? I'm not happy. I'm letting my mum down. She said all she needs to love me is for me to be healthy and happy, but I'm not happy. Therefore, does she love me? So when I believe that people who with a predisposition to anorexia, and certainly for me, are ridiculously sensitive. Like, you wouldn't believe how much we analyze absolutely everything. If I go to cross the road even now and somebody doesn't stop to let me cross the road, I'm not in America, so people in England, we stop to let each other cross the road.
Yeah, we
so
just run them over here.
If somebody doesn't stop to let me cross the road, most people would think that they're busy, or they're in a rush, or they're not concentrating, or they're just belligerent. For me, I'm like, if I was prettier, would they stop? If I was not as boring, would they let me cross the road? If I wasn't fat, if I was, all of this in a split second, and that goes on in my head 24 hours a day with every single situation I come into. It's always, it's always the self-esteem. But now I go home and cuddle my dog.
Oh, that's...
I think about
and
that.
Sometimes I stick a finger up at the person who didn't let me cross the road.
Good for you.
That's like sticking up 2 fingers at anorexia, and I like to do that.
Well, and Crystal's lucky she found you too, because a lot of people wouldn't have taken a loan out and done all that to keep her alive. So,
but she kept me alive, didn't she?
Yes. So you're both.
And even her passing taught me, and I promise I won't blab, but taught me something, because we went through 2 years of her kind of rehabilitation. And not only did she survive, but she ran through the fields again. She did survive. And then she got cancer. And I thought, I'm going to throw everything at this. I'm going to do everything a loving owner does. And one day, and I remember this like it was today, I was doing the housework, and she looked at me, and I knew she was in pain, and I was like, right, I'm going to call the vet. We're going to the vet. And she gave me this look, and it just was, I'm done, Mum. I'm done. And I just thought, and so I let her go. I let her go. And I just thought, this is what we do for our animals that we can't do for each other. And there comes a time when somebody hasn't had the luck for change, and they're done. And the only humane thing to do is let them go with dignity.
And you didn't give her up. You let her go. There's a difference. You tried everything, and
tried everything, spent everything, every therapy, hydrotherapy, hypnotherapy for dogs, massage therapy, every single therapy this poor dog had, whether it liked it or not. But she knew when she was done. She knew, and I had to respect that decision. Yeah.
Yeah, that hits home. Yeah.
Absolutely.
And now I suffer every day, but what helps me is, I know she's free. She's free.
Well, you're able to handle that on a different level because you are healthier in so many ways. And she really brought that forward. Your honesty in this conversation, I cannot tell you how much it helps parents and loved ones understand the disease. Because when we're in the midst of it, we have so many questions because we don't understand. And you've just awakened and made me think differently or think more about so many things. And so your honesty and your description of this journey is so incredibly powerful. And of course, it will be a little different than somebody else's because it's yours and your perspective and how you went through it and came out the other side and now are so honest. I just cannot thank you enough for being present and sharing your thoughts. And you need to know how powerful your message is. It's incredible. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
And I wish more people would ask questions, because I honestly feel that without knowledge, without understanding, like there's a real difference, isn't there, between understanding and sympathy, empathy and sympathy. I had a call today from a friend, I'll tell you quickly, and she just burst into tears and she said she just had a row with her husband. She suffers with anxiety, not eating disorder. She's never had an eating disorder. She suffers with anxiety, and it has got a lot worse during the whole COVID thing. And her husband doesn't get it. And she was beginning to doubt, is there a problem in the relationship? Can she be with this person? And I said to her, let's say her name was Mary, of course you can be with the relationship. You're asking your husband to have empathy. You can't give him it. He can't read it and he can't get it. He can sympathize, but no one can sympathize 24 hours a day, unless you're Mother Teresa. We're human. You can't. And so you're going to have rows. But empathy is something you can only have with experience.
Yes. Yeah. Your insight, I can see why in the field of working in mental health that you're incredible because you have amazing insight into so many different situations. Just listening to how you handled that with your friend was beautiful.
And it's honest insight. Honest. Yeah. She's not making anything up. She understands that there's no cookie cutter treatment for, everybody treated the same way. It's individualized. So,
but that's the trouble. It's labels, So, I know that at one part you said some people, in one of the emails you said some people may be disappointed in my recovery and something about if they think they're going to see you running through the fields with ice cream, not caring.
Yeah, can you tell us that about, you said something about no road to Damascus. And,
I think no road to Damascus. I think we all like something to hold on to and hope for. And we all like, and again, not wanting to stereotype, but us British particularly, we love a happy ending. We love a happy ending. And I am happy. There's no two ways about that. I am happy. But I don't have that end of the story where I don't ever think about food, or I can eat what I like, or I can go to a restaurant with friends. I don't, I don't live a life that's free of anxiety. Quite the opposite. My anxiety came back with a vengeance. So I think some people might find that disappointing. That you don't suddenly be able to integrate yourself again into life in the same way as maybe you might have done if you hadn't had those experiences or the problem with the low self-esteem. And I often think, like, if I was going to write a book, which I'm not, by the way, but if I was, I would call it Don't Mock My Bubble. Don't mock my bubble. Because so many times people say to me, Jane, you've got to step outside your comfort zone. You can't just avoid social situations. You can't just, not do the things that frighten you. And I'm thinking to myself, do you know what? After 25 years of trying and it nearly killing me, yes, I bloody can. And if that means it's just me, my dog, and the people I trust and a job I love, yeah, I'm going to do that. And you can try and pull me out, but I'm not coming, because for now it works. And this sounds really stupid and kind of sort of, I don't know. But when you do things like you go out and you notice birds and you notice flowers and you think, when you've got an eating disorder, you notice nothing. When you're walking, you're counting calories. When you're walking, you're doing maths. When you're looking at grass, you're thinking, I could eat that and it's not going to increase my calories. You wouldn't believe the stupid.
Yes.
Seriously?
Yeah.
Seriously?
Yeah.
When you open your front door, you think, I better not blow my nose because someone who's eaten a burger might have touched that door. No. And when you can live a life free of that after so many years, if that's recovery and that's as good as it gets, I'll take it.
Amen.
Every day I'll take it.
Yes.
Because you can live your life.
Yes.
Yes. Amen.
It's not about labels. It's not about stereotyping anything, because we're individuals, and it's about what sparks us and keeps us happy. And it's about our connections that are important to us. We don't have to have 1,000, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, this has been so great. Oh man, you've made me laugh. You've made me cry, and it's the honesty, and it is. And I wish more clinicians would understand. It doesn't have to be that perfect ending. Everybody doesn't have to go on to be a doctor or a lawyer or have a family of.
And I never thought
kids.
I never thought about a parent saying, "Well, I just want my kids to be healthy." Who hasn't said that? What parent hasn't said, "I just want my child to be healthy and happy"?
But that's the thing for parents, right?
Yeah.
The parents who criticize themselves, you will never. Let me tell you, you will never get it right. We will analyze every single thing you say and do, and we will make it wrong, because that will keep anorexia going, and anorexia keeps us alive. So you in some ways you fight a losing battle, and all you can do is what you did and just be there.
I wish we'd had this conversation.
If you're going to find your way out, you'll find your way out. The family's role, I think, is just to try and be there.
I wish we'd had this conversation when Emily was in the midst of her anxiety or anorexia, and it was getting worse. And I wish I could have talked to you then to understand.
But I think Emily sent her to us now.
Yes.
And I go back to the quote that we began with. There are no coincidences. The soul seeks its own path. And I think I thank you for your friendship now and those beautiful emails. I know we'll stay in touch. And you have touched the three of us so deeply. And I'm sure you will touch so many other people who are struggling, and parents who are struggling, and people who are affected with eating disorders who are struggling. And I think you will give them the courage to do it their own way. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's what we're supposed to do, right?
Yes. It's the best way.
Yes.
It's because you're right. We couldn't have, there were so many things that we couldn't force to happen, and that's part of our struggle. And so your honesty just helps us understand that the thinking that was going on in your head, when you talk about that, what it's your thinking, it just opens up things for us that it's only someone like you can give us.
It is so articulate in the way she does it, and a way she absolves us of. I feel like you've given me, the sign of the cross, and I don't even have to say a Hail Marys or Our Father. So thank you so much. Our time is almost up. Thank you so much, Jane. Is there anything that you would want to say to our listeners before we sign off here?
I think the only thing is, and it's the hardest thing in the world to do, I think, is to accept where you are now. Like, you might not be able to do what you said you were going to do, whether it was go and be a doctor or a lawyer, or there may be a lot of things now that you can't do that society thinks you could do. And it's really, really hard. But one of the hardest things for me is just accepting that I can't do those things. Anxiety is an illness that I've got. I can't get rid of it. If I accept it, if I accept that it is what it is and do my best with it every day, then I don't need anorexia to help me along the way.
Bless you, Jane. Bless you.
Parting message.
Beautiful soul. Thank you for coming into our lives. We'll stay in touch. Thank you. Alan, is there anything you want to say?
No, we just sending hugs.
Big
from
hugs
the other side.
To the other side of the pond.
You have the connection with you means so much to us. So we're stuck with you forever. You can't lose us.
Thank you. Have a wonderful weekend. Thank you, listeners. And
thank you to our producer and our sound engineer, Scott Fitzgerald at Rockbox Recording and Production, for his professional producing of this podcast and all the other ones we've done, and so much more. And please tell your friends about Once Shattered Picking Up the Pieces, and rate and review this podcast on the platform you're listening to it on, and just share the message, because everybody's mental health matters. Help us make a difference. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Namaste.